Thanks so much. And yeah, I'm like really excited to be here. I've been here last year. This year is even more amazing than last year. I'm really excited to talk to you about animations, and I will try to tell you sort of like a story and sort of try to demystify the creation process, the animation creation process, because sometimes it's a thing it takes time to understand like how to do it properly. So I'll try to lay it out. So just briefly about myself. After Ken talked about what I do, I'm developer advocate at Hasura. I am Google developer expert. I wrote a book on React Native. I consult clients, and I do web, mobile, VR, AR, and IoT. I like to say I probably need AI and blockchain to be on top of buzzwords. So in one world, I sort of like build cyberpunk future in a good way. And I actually have these stickers here, so if you want to grab them after the talk, find me. Now, I mentioned I work for Hasura. Hasura auto-generates high-performance real-time GraphQL on top of existing database. It can run anywhere where Docker can run, basically. You can connect it to any business logic that you want, and it has a venting system. Now it's like has really cool performance, and you can read more about that if you visit hasura.io. And yeah, it's for free because it's open source, so please also contribute. And you can actually go to learn.hasura.io, and if you're new to GraphQL or if you want to know best practice in GraphQL, it's not only Hasura related, it's related to any technology out there. We recently published React Native tutorials with GraphQL and how we do that, so check this out. Now, to the topic of our talk, why do we need to animate in the first place, right? So I want to address that. And some people say, okay, I will animate because I can. I mean, I learned the API, why wouldn't I do that? But it's important to understand why we do that. And before that, before talking about animations, I want to talk about us as humans. We are visually driven creatures. This slide would have been dull if it were without background or without animation, right? So we are driven towards something visually compelling, right? So again, why do we need to animate? We want our apps to stand out. There are millions of apps in any of the stores, and when we develop our app, we want it to be we want users to basically interact with our app somehow, to pay us money for this app, or do whatever you want whenever like you publish the app, right? We want to provide our users visual hints what to do in the app. And I like to say we want to define a story of your app. And yes, we are storytellers because we want to define how a user will go from one screen to another, will interact with the menus, interact with icons, with everything you have in the app. You need to tell this story. So user will be driven towards visually compelling things to interact with them. Now, what we also want to do, we want to reduce cognitive load, and I will talk about that in a bit. And we also want to reduce cognitive friction. And let's talk about cognitive load. And here I'm going from the tech topic to more psychology thing. So cognitive load is basically the amount of mental resources that takes us to process some information, right? And I will give you an example. What do you see here? Just yell it out. Right, there is no meaning, like it's just a square, right? But if I will tell you, I have a line, a specific length, and the end of this line, I have another line with the same length on the first line, perpendicular to the first line. And on the end of the second line, there is a third line, perpendicular to the second line, parallel to the first line with the same length as the first and the second. At the end of the third line, there is another line, perpendicular to the third, perpendicular to the first, connected to the first, parallel to the second with the same length. You will understand it's a square, but it will take you much more time to process that. The same apps without animations. Everything in this world is animated. There are physics everywhere. Like everything is micro interactions and tiny animations, right? So if we show our users app without animations, it will just take them maybe milliseconds, but it will take them time to understand what this app is and what it actually means. And this makes your app stand out in a bad way, because then people are like, what's that app? I'll just uninstall it. And you can say, okay, fine, but I will do like flying animations, exploding particles, fade-ins, fade-outs, all this crazy stuff. But then we can cause cognitive friction. And what is cognitive friction? There is some kind of visual language of things we expect to behave in some way. Let's say if I have an app, and I have a bullet in the middle of the app that will explode to particles that will spin, assemble into a message, and there will be types there. And it's a chat app. It's not something that you expect from the chat app, so it was like, what's going on with my phone, right? And that's because we need our UI to be predictable. We need to stick to the practices that are already there. I'm not saying don't invent anything. I'm saying learn from experiences of other people, learn from other apps that are out there that are working, right? And if you want to invent your own visual language, you can do so, but you need to be aware that you need to test that on users, on actual users, not your coworkers or your friends that maybe won't just tell you that your app sucks, but on actual users of the app. And UI should react fluidly to user actions, which brings me to another topic. And let's talk about animation types. And I'm not talking about hand-drawn Disney animations. I'm talking about animations in our apps. And let's look at these ugly model animations, so-called state-driven animation. What's happening with this model? This model is appearing and disappearing. What's wrong with that? The problem is I don't know what happened, right? What is the user action? If this is a form and the form is submitted, then what happened? It got error, it was sent, it was just canceled. So I don't know, right? Now, you're basically leaving your users in the dark, and I like to say you're basically shooting in every direction trying to get their attention. But you need to do something else. And let's see at this simple change, right? We can see that our form is opened and closed, right? So we can understand that it goes in the same place where it opened. Now, if I submit this form, it may fly to the right top corner. Or if there is an error, it may just shake into place, right? So it's different animations based on user actions. And this is called action-driven animations. And this is an example from Behance. And I would say this example actually a good one and a bad one. A good one is showing what is action-driven animations, but it's causing cognitive friction because it's too much. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't expect like the accordion to just flip and do like this type of stuff, right? So another type of animations is micro-interactions. And micro-interactions is something you even maybe haven't noticed. Like if you open a WhatsApp, you probably will see lots of micro-interactions you haven't seen previously. Let's, for example, look at the inbox notifications, right? So what we can see here on the right, top right corner, what we can see there, we can see spinning animations of the number, we can see color changes, slight opacity changes, text changes, fade-ins, size changes. So all of these in one single animation, which may be a tiny icon on your screen. So what's the point, right? Why do you invest time into this? Because this matters way more than this one. This one is too much, but this one gives you a feeling of, okay, this app is kind of cool. And sometimes you even cannot tell why it's cool, because like it feels cool, right? And this is because of micro-interactions. Now, there is a saying, magic is both in details and in the performance, and I'm not talking about like software performance, I'm talking about how you do this magic. And like to think, and basically I like to welcome you to sort of like React Native College of Wizardry. And why I call it magic? Because basically any sufficient technology, it's indistinguishable from magic. And let's do this like mental trip to medieval ages. One of you invent time machine, go to medieval ages, create React Native app, and show, here I have a new Facebook in medieval ages. It's either you will be the best magician of the realm, or more likely, you will be burnt at stake, right? So I like to think that all of us and all of you are magicians and storytellers, and we are telling here a story of a young Merlin, which is a mage, right? He's React Native mage, and he's experienced mage. He already knows animated API. How many of you are using animated API? He already knows Lottie. How many of you are using Lottie? And he knows reanimated. How many of you are using reanimated? Cool. So Merlin knows all these three, and he basically creates magic, right? So he gets a design from a proud artist, and he looks at the design and is like, how did you do that? And he gets like, it's magic, but I mean, Merlin is a mage, right? He's supposed to create this design, so how do he even starts, right? And he gets something like this. So he has a bunch of magic glyphs that are not loading, but for that I have the actual app. So let's scale it. So as you can see, these glyphs are here. If you click on a glyph, you get a list of spells. You click on a spell, have another glyph, and you have sort of like parallax scrolling. So he gets the whole thing. And he's like, oh, wait, how do I start, right? Like, how do I start creating this? And the main concept in animations and creating animations in React Native is sort of divide and conquer. You need to separate what styles are changing and go like one by one and understand what's going on. So we have micro interactions here, right? We've seen them, tiny bouncing icons. And we have action-driven animations because when I click on or tap on the glyph, I get to another screen with some kind of interactions are different. We have screen transitions, and we have so-called shared element. The shared element is when on one screen there is an element in one position on one visual look, and then on the other screen there is another element. When we move from one screen to another, it kind of moves to that place. It's called shared element. And we also have gestures, animations on scroll behaviors. How many of you think there are gestures here in the app? How many of you are thinking it's on scroll behavior? What about the others? So it's on scroll behaviors, but yeah, we will see it in a bit. So the different style types are scale changes, are opacity changes, translate of X and Y. We've seen this for Parallax. There are gestures, right? Which are basically, we're using on-scroll behaviors to create these gestures. And let's actually see in the code, or sorry, we will see the magic scroll of Merlin. Let's start with transitions of the shared element. Now for that, we'll be using React Native Fluid Transitions, which is a library that is using React Native Gesture Handler, and it's a library that uses React Navigation, which also uses React Native Gesture Handler. And basically, it gives you the shared element in a more convenient way. You can obviously do it yourself, but it exposes Fluid Navigator that gives you more syntax sugar. So transition will look like this. You will have a wrapping element transition with a shared key. Now this shared key, spells in this example, will be the same key on two different screens. And whenever we pass the same key, element will be transitioned from one state on one screen to a state on the other screen. So in this example, we are rotating it. And let's see. Example here, so it's that rotation, right? Now, what about parallax scrolling? Parallax scrolling, the implementation is pretty simple. In a way, we have animated API, we have animated event. So what we can do, we can just take this animated event and set it on our animated value. It's up to you, it can be on state, it can be on in different place. And then we need to translate from one point to another. But there is a catch there. We want to translate images when they one behind the other, right? So whenever we, in the boundaries of the screen, whenever we scroll the image, we don't want to translate, but we want to translate the image that comes next, or the image that's before that. That's why I'm using index, and we'll see I'm using width of the screen to calculate the amount of translate that I need to pass to make two images translated one behind the other. Now, when I have these styles, I just add them as animated styles, right? And it's supposed to work if I make this getInterpolate work. Now, getInterpolate function, how many of you are using Interpolate? So Interpolate function, basically what it does, it gives me, okay, this is my input range, this is my output range. Do your magic. Basically, you say there is the first element in the range, the middle, and the third. In this case, I have out of screen on the right, out of screen on the left, and in between when you're moving your image, right? And I'm saying if I have the first image, then I just move it 150, like half of the screen, almost half of the screen. And the other way around, if I snap to the left or to the right, I just go off screen. Now, it's important part to use extrapolate, because if you don't use extrapolation in general, not only this example, when you use interpolate functions, it's important to use extrapolate because, especially with the animated event, because then you can, if you don't use that, you can get unpredictable results. What extrapolate does, in this case, it clamps or like limits the range to the end of the output range, end of the input range. Because let's assume my input range will reach 2,000, 3,000, whatever. Now, if I don't have clamp defined, then interpolate function will basically interpolate all the values in the same way that it did before hitting the end of the input range, output range. So it's important to use extrapolation. Now, what about gestures and using pen responder? How many of you use pen responder? Don't. Because you can get this. No, I'm just kidding, but you need to be aware of the fact that we have JS native. I'm exaggerating here, but I really suggest to use React Native gesture handler for handling gestures on the native side. Obviously, if you don't, you cannot work around that. You use pen responder, and yeah. Now there is also React reanimated, and with React Native gesture handler gives you a little bit different API. But it works completely on the native side, don't need to pass native driver, and Reanimated has these clocks features and lots of really cool stuff that you should probably check out. Now, what about really complex animations? Something like this, which is not that complex. So there is a Lottie library. Some of you are already using Lottie. Now, with Lottie is a cool library that gives you an ability to get JSON from After Effects or something else what your designer used, and basically import this JSON as a file inside React Native Lottie and have this cool animation on the screen. So it's cool, right? But the problem is, I showed you example of the micro interactions. Imagine you have an app and you tell yourself, okay, I won't go a little crazy on really heavy action-driven animations, but I will do like 100 micro interactions. And all of them are using Lottie. Probably your app will crash, especially on Android, but I'm not sure with Hermes, maybe it won't crash already. So yeah, need to check it. But the thing is with Lottie, it's good, but beware of some animations with like huge JSON files and with huge like things going on. And the problem also when you rotate the screen with Lottie, some animations behave differently, behave in really weird way. So make sure you have 1, 2 such animations, and like, I'm not the one to tell you how many animations to have in your app, right? But think about the complications of having performance, animations bad for performance. Now I have several takeaways that I want you to get from this talk, right? And the first one is animations are not that scary, like at all. Like what you need to do, basically, you need to understand how to separate them, to parse, divide them, and conquer the magic spell that designer gave you to create, right? And beware of state-driven animations. Sometimes you get from designer, you get the whole like animations, and you look at that and you say, you know what? It's state-driven animations. I won't do that. It's a good thing to say I won't do, but I mean, you work in the company, right? So you kind of need to interact with your designer. But like brainstorm together, think about something better, something better for users, something better for yourself also. Because action-driven animations will be easier to read later on. It will be easier to read the code if you write them correctly. Now tell your story of your app, because I will mention it again. You're all storytellers. You're all telling these cool stories in your apps, and it's important to memorize this concept that you need to be aware what your users want, and you need to be aware how to drive your users towards the desired goal, right? Don't overcomplicate things. Lots of people overcomplicate things in a way of like, let's abstract everything, or let's do these cool animations that will make our app stand out, or let's do like, I don't know, something like, don't overcomplicate things. Not only related to animations, in general, just don't. Reduce cognitive load and reduce cognitive friction. So every time you see animation, think of how your user will perceive this animation and how if it will cause cognitive load or if it will cause cognitive friction, right? So the example of the chat, right, with exploding stuff, and it might be cool for a game. It might be not cool for the chat app. And stick to working practices and experiences. And again, you can invent things, but when you invent things and invent new UX language, new UI language, new animations, all of this, you need to understand that you need to test them well on your actual users. So make sure you recognize that and think what's better for your app. Now, I have, before I want to wrap it up, I have an announcement I want to make. So I call it Back to School workshop. So I will be doing 4 workshops on React Native online in last 2 weeks of August. So it will be about animations with reanimated and with animated and with everything more getting into complex stuff. It will be AR workshop that I did 2 days ago. So it will be a different version, but will be online. There will be Reason React workshop, and yes, we will be actually creating actual working apps in ReasonML and not just hearing fancy talks. And there will be React Native with Bluetooth and IoT, and yeah, so I try to kind of bring all of cool talks I did in recent years and do this like back to school thing. And this is just like the form to get, if you're interested, just like sign up. And there is QR code, so it's easier for you to scan. And again, I'm really happy to be here. And I hope you learned something from this talk. And I really appreciate if after the talk, you just tell me how bad it was. Please do. I really appreciate feedback. And yeah, thanks so much. And This is my Twitter handle, YouTube channel, and my website. Thanks.